Between the spring and the summer, we're into picks and bans for game number 1 of tonight's first best-of-3 matchup. You can see already Thresh ban coming out against Sheep. Not only are the playmaking supports back in full force, however, Sheep is a very, very powerful Thresh player.
Yep, got his name, kind of one-tricking Thresh a little bit way back in the solo queue before he got picked up. Surprisingly, a Warwick ban. That's something that some people have played, and it's a little considered underpowered compared to some of the top junglers, things like the Elise, the Lee Sin, the Thresh. A little bit more obvious in how it plays the game out with its very, strong initiation in its ultimate, but very telegraphed as well, and not a super strong early game in terms of skirmishing. So, if you get to 6 with it, it can work, and I guess CLG had seen enough of it out of Wiggly potentially in solo queue that they didn't want to give it up to him there.
Well, it's one of the things we've seen in the EU LCS as well. We've seen Xerxes from Unicorns of Love, and earlier today, Yankos was playing it, and it kind of fits more with the not necessarily more with just the fact that you're a carry jungler kind of style, but the carry junglers of the European LCS are using it. And I mean, when MarkZ was scouted at the scouting grounds, he was that first pick overall because he had that sort of carry potential. So that being banned away, interesting kind of target ban, but surprisingly, there's none from the side of CLG Academy. The LeBlanc, the Elise, very powerful picks being banned away. Zac and Gragas kind of follow suit as well as very powerful picks in the meta, but that leaves open the Gallia.
Well, the big thing to talk about as well is the fact that that's 4 jungler bans right now. So Tempo Storm's also going to be able to get the first pick out of this. It puts CLG in a little bit of a bind where if you take the jungler early, you give up Galio, probably the strongest pick left up based off these bans. But if you take that away, then you're going to lose out on the jungler. So you can expect maybe a Lee Sin here. And then from that, you're looking what really is the next strongest thing. Maybe that Rek'Sai is something that MarkZ has hopefully been playing. They'll have to see if he's done that. The Caitlyn pick as well, extremely strong. Pretty much the best bot laner, what people would say universally. Strong in lane. Its mid-game power trough is greatly exaggerated. It's totally fine. And then its late game gets crazy. So Caitlyn, super strong pick overall. Good to see Tempo Storm grabbing that. Yeah,
so they wound up going with the Rek'Sai as well, which is also pretty good into the Lee Sin. Lee Sin, of course, very much excels in the fact that he makes early game plays happen, whether it be ganks or invading upon the opposing jungler, and Rek'Sai just has that knockup to kind of interrupt the damage from the Sonic Wave resonating strike.
And it has very unique early paths as well with its ability to get over walls easily. So she can do these kind of tricky, what I call Lyra clears, because he was the first guy I saw doing it, where you take the XP quints and you go 2 jungle camps and a Scuttle Crab. And that's really terrifying on red side early on because your top laner is going to be very, very exposed for the wraparound gank where you come over the wall. So that's a path that I've seen that's very tricky to deal with. And even if, your Rek'Sai isn't doing that, you still have to be scared of it as a top laner on red side. So, Fallen Bandit could be under a little bit of pressure here.
Well, we've seen the evolution of Santorin throughout his gameplay. We'll see if he's evolved his jungle pass to kind of match that style as well. The Olaf is going to pick up for MarkZ, which is something that he was very proficient with during the scouting grounds. It was a very long time ago and a bit of a different Olaf, but he still has kind of seen some more competitive play, specifically from Reignover.
Right, it's still a strong pick. If you play Olaf well, you're still a monster in the early game. It's about being able to find those openings. With the Galio, though, it does give you a little bit more setup in a sense, where the problem with Olaf is you need to build health, which makes you pretty weak to resistances, and then you kind of run at people, and if they kite you out, you die. Having the extra damage reduction from the Galio ultimate protects you a ton, as well as, you're delivering the Galio on top of you, so you usually have more follow-up than you might otherwise. Jhin, a pick that synergizes pretty well with that, can contribute from long range with the ultimate.
Yep, we've seen more and more Jhin being picked into the Caitlyn as Caitlyn's kind of become the quintessential bot lane first pick overall. Jhin, one of the more powerful utility picks, but also kind of survive in lane against the long range of Caitlyn, as you mentioned already, can stay very far away. The Orianna is going to be the last pick coming out here from Tempo Storm. A little bit of a different pick here from Selfie. He was known to pretty much play anything that was very powerful, was very well known for his assassin play out of the mid lane. His Fizz was powerful, his Cassidy was very, very aggressive, but that also has the synergy with the Rek'Sai now, so they wind up going into those team fight situations. Gives Rek'Sai a way to deliver that ball system.
Right, so with the ultimate, you now have 2 gap closers. That was a big problem previously for Rek'Sai, was that the tunnel in was relatively slow and telegraphed, so if they had any sort of displacement or knockup or anything, they could stop you from really getting into the team fight. You relied on your flash extremely hard. Now with being able to use the Prey Seeker to kind of set up your ultimate to be able to get into a team fight, it allows you a couple more options for engaging. Orianna, of course, can then put the ball on you, you go right in. It might also be a takeaway because Olaf with an Orianna is extremely terrifying as well, so it could be a little bit of a takeaway as well as fitting their comp.
No, well, now we're in the second ban phase. We see some of the interesting kind of target bans coming out here. We see the Alawi banned away here by CLG Academy, but heavily targeting down on Tuesday's mid lane champion pool. They've gotten the Orianna for themselves. So they'll ban away the Syndra, they'll ban away the Talia, the things that would normally wind up picking into that Orianna to have a little bit of an advantageous early game matchup.
It is a little surprising that they didn't ban the Ahri there. Syndra does well, but Orianna is considered, pretty close to a skill matchup against it. Talia, pushes it in and roams around the map, mostly ignores it, doesn't want to interact with the Orianna, and they targeted those two away as opposed to what many consider the stronger counter pick in the Ahri. I guess this is Selfie saying they don't think Tuesday's going to play that into him, and we'll have to see if that's the case, but no surprise to see some mid lane bans given that they had one pick and CLG Academy did not.
No, the last ban was the Rakan coming out from the side of CLG Academy, so Tempo Storm are going to be prompted to take something maybe a little bit more major. Like we saw the hover of the Braum, but they are going to wind up blocking in the Zyra, so a very powerful bully lane on the bottom lane of the Zyra and Caitlyn. It's not quite the Ashe-Zyra combination we've seen, but there's a lot of damage down there.
Definitely one of the most annoying lanes to deal with early on. Huge push potential, huge harass potential underneath the turrets. This is one of those things where if the Olaf can get down there early and get a couple kills, you negate a lot of that lane strength because if they fall behind, they don't operate nearly as well underneath their own turret.
Right.
So you're going to have to hope CLG Academy does something to influence that bot lane because early on, not looking good. Jhin will struggle here, especially if they can't find a good support matchup.
Yeah, and we mentioned that MarkZ was kind of the guy to watch on the side of CLG Academy. And it looks like they are going to wind up blocking in a Rumble here for their lineup, which will cement the fact that it's going to be a mid lane Galio.
And also the fact that that's new Rumble as well, with the changes to how the overheat work, or not the overheat, well, there were those changes as well, but the big one is the Flame Spitter change. Higher base damage, but doing less damage to minions. So it's a lot of people don't think it's nearly as strong because Rumble often needs to get the push in his advantage and kind of just Flame Spitter the wave as well as the opponent. But now it's a lot harder to do that. And then, like we said, you want to kill that bot lane. What's the best champion to do that? Blitzcrank right now, and you got Afro teaching you. So hopefully CLG Academy has a lot of experience on how to use that one.
Well, we'll see if the Blitzcrank's going to be able to grab the Zyra. Of course, the plans could be a little bit of a blocker in those plans. You got to have really fast reflexes to do so. It looks like that the last pick overall for Tempo Storm is going to be a Quas special. He's got his signature Swain up in the top lane.
Yeah, and once you flex the Galio out of there, it does open up the Swain pick a little bit more. Swain, of course, does still win the matchup versus Galio, but Galio is happy to build MR. So now that the Galio is going mid lane, you're pretty confident that you can take this into the Rumble now. You're outside that Flame Spitter range a little bit, as well as the fact that Swain can struggle against the push early on a little bit against some other matchups, but like we said, the reduced push now for Rumble, maybe not as much of an issue.
Right, and the fact that Rumble has less wave clear means that that matchup's a little bit more safe, and of course it also means that the side of Tempo Storm is going to have a little less tankiness to it now. You have Swain, who can be a drain tank, but that Ignite, building something like an Executioner's calling a Morellonomicon, could be a little bit more effective, but don't really see a Morellonomicon user on their team now, do we?
No, not necessarily. You might, and they don't even have, I mean, I guess Jhin can take some early armor pen and get some damage reduction with some previous wounds, but overall, not a ton options available there, so we'll have to see how they choose to do that. But of course, if you just blow them up instantly, that's a good answer to the drain tank as well.
Well, we see game number 1. We're loaded onto the Rift here. CLG Academy, the newcomers to the Challenger Series here. They tried to get in the spring, but they were denied doing so. Tempo Storm, on the other hand, they're a bit of the veterans of the Challenger Series here. They got a couple new fresh faces on their team. Of course, only really one of them in this game in Selfie.
Nice play there out of Selfie. Kind of underappreciated the fact that when you're against an Olaf and a Blitzcrank, two of the strongest level 1 champions in the game, you get to your spot early, you get your ball out to make sure that you can spot in the advances there, and CLG Academy was trying to go for a cheeky little play using the mid lane to get into the side river brush, but Tempo Storm scouted it out.
That's one of the things I'm really interested with. We haven't gotten a chance to see any CLG Academy games on broadcast as of yet, but I mean, CLG, they're the unit that they had the longest standing roster together for an LCS team or NALCS team in the history of the NALCS. That very recently changed when they traded away Xmithie, but they were always built on the team synergy. They were always the team that could kind of come out ahead and win a team fight and turn around a poor situation like we saw them do when they went to MSI. Now you have a team that has played together for a very long time, their Academy team. They've kind of built up that own synergy throughout the spring, so when they weren't playing in the Challenger Series, it's not proven results quite yet, but against a team like Tempo Storm, if they're able to make a couple plays happen, that could be very impressive for some up-and-comers.
Sure. I would hesitate to compare an Academy team with the greatest performance out of a North American team at an international tournament.
That's true.
Might be a little bit of a reach, but the idea that CLG does value teamwork very highly is still true for sure.
I'm glad you could at least understand my analogy there.
Yes.
The bottom side of the map we mentioned might be a little bit of a pain point for CLG Academy. Freeze and Sheep in this bottom lane have built some established synergy in and of themselves. Those two have been not only just in the spring split of the Challenger Series, but duo queuing together quite a lot, as we see already. The aggression coming out from Phil lands one grab, and that's enough to turn the exhaust down onto Zag, but the very powerful poke pressure coming out from the Zyra-Caitlyn duo just forcing away the Jhin.
At the same time, CLG did get a summoner out of that for free. The exhaust is now down. Next time that you get a hook, the all-in is even that much easier to win. We'll have to see if that's what they choose to do.
Mid lane matchup here, just going to be a bit of a shove fest early on. Selfie and Tuesday, a little bit easily protective. They're each other in the mid lane here.
So Wiggly did go for that early kind of, oh, hold on, hook in the bot lane.
Ooh, and another Summoner Spell burn here. The root is going to follow from the Deadly Flourish, and CLG Academy might be being pushed in, but not despite burning some Summoner Spells, making some plays of their own.
So, yeah, Wiggly did go for that kind of XP Quint clear that we were talking about, but CLG Academy, very aware of that, puts wards down really, really early in the top river, so they scout that out, and it seemed like Wiggly was aware of the fact that he was seen, did not even bother pathing up to the top side to look for an angle onto Fallen Bandit, instead goes down to the bot side, tries to find the red buff up for OmarGard, because it's pretty frequent that a Olaf will start on the blue buff, but OmarGard intelligently also does a full side red clear. So both junglers, some really early adaptations that seem very intelligent by both of them.
Yeah, so some very interesting pathing coming out from both of these junglers, and as you mentioned for CLG Academy, OmarGard is kind of the guy to kind of get things going, whereas Wiggly was kind of the quiet off-season acquisition from Tempo Storm. He played previously on Big God's Jackals, and he wasn't necessarily a focal point for the team, but he did have a very adaptive style. Whatever the team needed him to play, he picked it up, and he performed pretty adequately on that one. He never really had any standout performances, but on the side of Tempo Storm, you have players like Quas, Selfie, Freeze, or Revan, depending who's on the bottom lane. Sometimes all you really need is that role player.
Sure, and we talk about how Sentinel's champ pool was clearly best on Vi, and even he and the team were kind of saying, we don't know why we do the best on Vi, but whenever they had that with some other chain CC, like a Syndra and Ashe, and they would just find pickoffs and get easy kills that way. Now, with Wiggly being able to come in and, like you said, fill that team role a little bit easier. Here, Selfie getting ganked.
Gap close with the Justice Punch into the Idol Duran taunt, but OmarGard was not going to be able to land the axe to follow chase on that one. Selfie did want to pop in his Ghost, though. He's got a little bit spooked in the mid lane.
Yeah, like CLG Academy running around, getting summoners all over the place, some early in the bot lane. Now they get a Ghost in the mid lane. And you see Phil potentially wanting to roam up and find an angle onto the Orianna as well. Fallen Bandit showing that the Rumble's still fine, already at level 5, and a lot of people said that the initial concern was the level 1 and level 2. And even with the potential pressure from the Rek'Sai, the fact it was scouted out so well, he could continue playing the top lane aggressive early on.
Yeah, and we see a little bit of itemization adaptation from that early game. Both of those top laners going for the Doran shield rather than seeing something like a Doran's ring start on Swain. Where in the bottom lane matchup with the Doran shield were more popular, we saw a longsword 3 health potion start from the side of Zag, but already CLG Academy getting down some early pressure on the map, transitioning that into some early dragging controls. They did force away Sheep and Freeze, so they did pull both summoner spells. That's just going to be an easy Infernal extremely early on.
Yeah, OmarGard, right before that gank, he turned mid lane and dropped a ward on the top side. It had scouted out Wiggly, I believe, and so they know that they're free on the bot lane to move in and grab that Infernal Dragon. Similarly, because they had already forced some of those summoners down the bot lane, Tempo Storm's playing a little bit more aggressive. You see here, freezing the lane instead of really hard shoving it, not wanting to get hooked in an exposed lane.
So Tempo Storm, one of the things that was a bit of their downfall in the spring split was the fact that they tended to play very heavily around the bottom side of the map, and if Freeze didn't necessarily have a lot going, they didn't make things happen on the map until after about the 20-minute mark or so. CLG Academy, their strength is kind of in their team play, and we mentioned they had some decent macro moves across the map, specifically in their game against Delta Fox, but they're making the early map movements here. The big question we're going to see now, I mean, we're only 5 minutes into the game, so there's a lot of questions we still have yet to answer, but are CLG Academy going to be able to capitalize and have Tempo Storm adapted their playstyle?
Here goes Wiggly into the mid lane, trying to get onto Tuesday.
Yeah, was able to go on to get in the knock-up onto him, but a good flash away from the command Shockwave. A teleport's going to be trying to turn this one around as Fallen Bandit comes in. Equalizer cuts off Selfie's escape. He has to flash back under his tower, but he's in a small corridor. Flash forward, and first blood goes to Fallen Bandit.
Nice teleport gank, not 100% out of the woods yet. Tempo Storm not actually going to collapse. Nice reaction there as a team. That's the synergy you're talking about, ready to teleport at a moment's notice. He had just gone back to base to shop, and it was the perfect time to teleport back in. Quas had not shoved in the top lane quite as much as he probably wanted to, and a nice first blood for CLG Academy here.
Yeah. And capitalizing kind of the fact that Tempo Storm was freezing away in the bottom lane. They weren't necessarily in a spot to really jump onto Zag, and that let Phil kind of roam around to that mid lane as well. Good hook, forces the flash away from Sheep as well, and this early game is all CLG Academy.
They need to keep pushing this early game advantage. You would think that Tempo Storm's comp with the Orianna and the Caitlyn will outscale eventually. And here's another look at this first blood. That teleport coming in. Selfie trying to hold his flash a little bit here. Doesn't actually take that much more damage. There's a nice look, but just when you have an Olaf and a Rumble willing to flash underneath your turret, it's hard to get out of there as an Orianna.
Yeah, when you got 4 members of the opposing team in your lane at level 6 or level 7, it's very difficult to get away as well.
Not quite ready for that one.
CLG Academy focusing down on, one of the strong points you mentioned from Tempo Storm, the fact that Selfie, we saw in his stats at the beginning of the series, he had one of the highest mid lane jungle proximity. He was 2nd place overall in the Challenger Series. His CS differential was 1st place for mid laners in the Challenger Series, and he's kind of been a point that Tempo Storm have not necessarily built around, but they've kind of shored up some of those earlier game weaknesses in the fact that they've switched out Selfie for Hat-Tricks, and Hat-Tricks is a little bit more of a I'll go even style. Selfie, like you mentioned, more aggressive in the middle.
And that's something that the team, like you said, struggled with at points last year, was having enough playmaking early. As Phil getting a little bit caught out here. Does get the ultimate for nothing. Going to be able to take this ultimate, be fine.
Yeah.
Have to go back to base eventually. Tuesday getting opened up on.
Yeah, looks like Tempo Storm still not content to let this mid lane go, and Wiggly on a return gank finally picks up that kill on the Galio.
That's what we're talking about, the playing around mid lane that you were just hitting on. The fact that Selfie does play so much more aggressive than Hat-Tricks. It forces openings, forces the enemy to either trade aggressive if you were back off and end up in a CS differential. And if the guy's willing to go toe-to-toe with you, bring your jungler and get a kill.
Yeah, and we saw that kind of textbook executed here as the return gang from Wiggly nets Selfie an assist. Wiggly winds up being the one to pick up the kill, but they're going to trade back on some mid lane tower damage. Forces Phil to continue to move around the map and kind of be in these places just to threaten with the Blitzcrank hook, but it has given him a bit of an experience disadvantage. You see him now just hitting level 5, whereas on the bottom lane, in return to kind of help Zag relieve a little bit of pressure, there were 2 level 6s down there for Tempo Storm.
And also while I was out of lane this entire time, they're continuing pushing the bot lane very, very aggressively, getting that one low. Now Fallen Bandit getting chased down by Quas on the top side.
Yeah, Quas just with the Ravenous Flock on, trying to chase down Fallen Bandit. A flash forward, but the Scrap Shield's going to save him. One more auto attack will not seal the deal. Fallen Bandit stays up.
Just barely staying alive there, almost dying to the all-in out of Quas. And despite some of these good early game plays out of CLG Academy, it doesn't seem like they quite have a hold on this grip. Now a big CS advantage accruing in the top and mid lane, as well as the kill being answered. And the turret's starting to get low.
Yeah, bottom lane here. Maybe assuming that the Caitlyn lane is going to wind up coming out ahead anyway, trying to utilize the Blitzcrank's early game advantages to roam around and get those, at least the threat of the Blitzcrank hooks down. But as you mentioned, the early game advantages they've been making to move around the map are kind of set off by the fact that they are down in CS in multiple lanes.
The other thing, too, is it's really nice to be able to land those hooks on Desira and burn her flash so they can't play quite as aggressive as they really want to. But at the same time, you need to start turning some actual kills with it. And so as great as it is that you force Sheet's flash twice, what is the net result? What, a slightly slower turret dropping, maybe a little bit less of a CS advantage out of the Caitlyn than you would really think. That's not really what you're hoping for with your comp.
Yeah, I guess it gives them the opportunity to roam around, because with Zyra with no flash, if Olaf shows up, then she's pretty much dead. They have to play a little bit safer, and they have been freezing. But the fact of the matter is Phil's blown some summoner spells. He's got no assists for all the roams he's had all around the map. So
yeah, he's roaming more to cover plays than he is to make his own. And at the same time, Zyra is not much of a roamer anyway, so she's perfectly content to stay in lane and just shove the turret down anytime he's out of lane. You know, showing mid, catching CS, that's the perfect time to get some harassment down. And if they were able to combo an Olaf gank down that bot lane at some point and really take that bot lane strength away from Tempo Storm, then the Blitzcrank pick would have been great. But all that said, Blitzcrank is known for the ability to just instantly win a game at any point, assuming it's a late game hook.
Well, so while Tempo Storm's bottom lane is A-OK to be rooted down here, CLG Academy are once again moving around the bottom side of the map, making sure they establish vision control, because it's been 6 minutes since the first dragon fell. We're only 11 minutes into this game. A Cloud Drake's going to be the next one to come on up. CLG Academy, it might not be the best one for their combat stats, but the Drake control could be something they look to establish early on this game.
Have to see if they're able to keep going for those dragons. It's one of those team synergy things you hope that they're a lot cleaner on with their ability to control around Dragon. Here, they're going to try and make a bot lane dive, TPing in Fallen Bandit, but Tempo Storm's going to answer.
Yeah, curtain calls here. They even wind up using the hero's entrance to want to pick up the first kill down on the Sheep. It's teleport follow was there from Quas, but this is all going perfect for CLG Academy. Double kill picked up for Tuesday. Another one falls for Omar God, and now they're trying to focus out on this first tower, but Wiggly's coming in with a response. The ultimate's going to get dodged out. He takes a large amount of damage and has to get the command protect from Orianna just to stay alive.
CLG finally find the opportunity to make a big bot lane play, and it seemed like Tempo Storm underestimated CLG Academy's collapse. They were not ready for the Galio to come in as well, thinking that they're going to turn a 4v3 dive, ends up being a 5v3 dive, and that's a little bit too easy for the very tanky CLG Academy to make. Starts off with that long-range Jhin ultimate. This is what we were saying, that when you have your Olaf Galio diving, Jhin can still contribute from very far away. Starts slowing down the members of Tempo Storm. Actually lands all his shots. Great contribution there on the Jhin. and then one person instantly dead. Very easy to chase down the rest. We talk about the drain tanking of Swain. Not very effective when you're completely focused fire down, and a great play out of CLG Academy there.
Yeah, specifically when you have Blitzcrank running Ignite in the bottom lane as well, because he wants to play aggressive, wants to play up in their faces. So we see CLG Academy, they haven't been able to answer with a tower, but they have been able to answer back a couple of kills, which gives them a slight, about 1,000 gold lead so far. Scuttle Crab, however, has been secured by Tempo Storm off the back of that play, and it looks like they're going to be going for a response in this bottom lane as well. I mentioned the pressure Zyra and Kate were putting down this bottom lane tower. They're going to get the first tower of the game.
Nice answer out of Tempo Storm, bringing that gold lead back close to even. CLG Academy wanted to collapse down there. You saw MarkZ and Tuesday moving down, but a little bit too late to save the turret. They head back to their respective lanes, and instead they're going to try and make a play here on the mid lane. Selfie just walks away. Yeah,
Tuesday maybe a little bit too slow on that taunt. He's not able to catch up to the fleet-footed Mercury Treads first Orianna. They do see an Abyssal Mass pick up for Tuesday in the mid lane. This is going to give Tempo Storm a bit of a window of opportunity to try to sight this Cloud Drake for themselves. So they had the Scuttle Crab control a little bit earlier. CLG Academy, though, they were moving towards that mid lane. They're still in the area to respond to this one, and Tempo Storm want to play this one a little bit safer. Deciding to back away at about a 2,000 HP Drake. Looks like they might just give it away to CLG Academy. 3 members of them force away 3 members of Tempo Storm.
A couple of things at play there. First, the gank mid forces Selfie out of there, so he loses control of the mid lane, meaning that the Galio and the Olaf have the inside track. Blitzcrank is around there threatening a hook at any point, which can be very, very scary if the rest of the team's following up. And then Fallen Bandit had roamed down from the top lane, giving them a numbers advantage. So it felt like Tempo Storm kind of got outmoved in that play, even though they had the control around the bot lane. They didn't have control anywhere else to make sure they could grab that dragon.
Yeah, and we've talked about, or I know you've actually gone into more analysis on this in the NALCS, the fact that mid lane priority when Baron is a thing on the map, you can still utilize that pressure in the mid lane to take these lesser objectives like the early game dragon, specifically when you have advantages on your bottom side or mid side of the map.
It's something you'll hear a lot of top teams talk about endlessly. If you want to contest blue buffs, get mid priority. If you want to contest dragons, get mid priority. There's a number of reasons to always be trying to focus on pushing in that mid wave. It helps in so many different situations. It buys you more time. It makes it harder to trade objectives. I could rant endlessly about the importance of mid lane priority.
It's almost like it's the center of the map.
Something like that.
Yeah, but CLG Academy have yet to take a tower for themselves as Tempo Storm that's taken one. They've moved their dual lane to the mid lane, but that's where the priority is. So that's going to be CLG Academy collapsing down and picking up a kill very quickly onto Sheep. Rumble Equalizer was used, and Freeze is trying to run himself out of there. And it looks like he will be A-okay. There's no vision here from CLG Academy to really kind of warrant a chase through here. Phil might be looking for a cheeky Blitzcrank grab over the wall, but it looks like Freeze is A-okay to get out of there.
Good explosive move out of CLG Academy there. Could have gone even worse than now. Squash tries to check the Rift Herald, but ends up in a bad spot.
The immediate turn on to Quas as MarkZ pops the Ragnarok. The hero's entrance follows as well, and that's going to be Quas going down. Wiggly ults in just to try to delay this Rift Herald being taken, but Zag is there to pick up a kill as well. We did wind up seeing Fallen Bandit fall to Selfie in the mid lane, but that's going to be a Rift Herald acquired now by CLG Academy as well. Sorry, bot lane.
Seems like he got picked off over the wall based off where that death marker is. Bit of a scrappy situation all over the map. CLG Academy make a play on the mid lane, getting a pick while also going for the Rift Herald. Foss and Wiggly get baited into going up there, and because there's so much stuff happening around the top side of the map, you see Fallen Bandit trying to get down to cover bot lane, bumps into Selfie there and gets taken out. Overall, I believe that is a 3-for-1, as well as being able to grab that Rift Herald. And hopefully, no turrets taken yet, but a lot are getting low, and you might see CLG starting to get some objectives.
We kind of saw something like this not that long ago, only it was a Rumble coming in, so MarkZ, although he pops his Ghost, is going to want to get the heal out of Freeze in the mid lane. CLG Academy making these early game maneuvers. We mentioned that this is kind of the style of play that we see those challenger teams that do well in the Challenger Series starting to learn and starting to kind of take onto their own as they wind up playing together a little bit more. You know, maybe you have a veteran of the LCS that is kind of your lead shot caller, or maybe you have that pre-established team synergy like CLG Academy. But right now, just judging based off this specific game, this specific early game, this doesn't look like a 5th place challenger team.
No, they're showing extreme coordination all over the map. The early dive in the bot lane, that gank on the mid lane with the roaming Rumble, the coordination on turning off of the Rift Herald to finish off Quas. A lot of good stuff out of them, and like we said, a lot of turrets available. So even though this gold lead seems small right now, they do have pressure all over the map, so you can expect these to start dropping. They still have a Rift Herald to use as well to secure another one. A lot of things that they can do.
Now, one of the things that they don't have on their side are some of these CS advantages. Like you mentioned, mid lane still an advantage of the side of Tempo Storm. Top lane has kind of evened out a little bit, but Tempo Storm, they're the established team. They have the veteran experience. They're the ones that know that even if they are slightly behind at this point, they do have a composition that will scale very well into the later stages of the game. You have the Orianna turnaround team fights. You have a Caitlyn who will be a monster in the later stages of the game, and even though she's maybe falling behind a little bit of her power trough or power curve right now, you know, kind of the Energizer build, the static ship rapid fire cannon has eliminated some of that mid-game power lull from the Caitlyn pick. So Tempo Storm still have the composure to kind of hang on here, but CLG Academy are trying to put the pedal to the metal once again in the mid lane. Oh my God, running forward and zoning people away from that tower as the Rift Herald helps them take it down. They've actually picked up a kill on the Selfie, and a Blitzcrank hook comes in. They get a double kill on the Fallen Bandit now.
Rift Herald's still alive.
Falling. This is going to be a 2-tower push in the mid lane, and I was saying the Tempo Storm maybe were stemming the bleeding, but at this point, CLG Academy are continuing to pry open that wound. They're pressuring a middle inhibitor tower at 18 minutes into this game.
You get to see the power of a Rift Herald when someone makes a mistake. Tempo Storm cannot defend this turret. They're getting down very low, 3v5, trying to make sure they can't get it. CLG Academy getting a little greedy now, trying to finish off this turret. Will they actually walk forward to try and get it? Zig getting the last shot in. They got it.
That was quite...
Zigzag.
Zigzag. Well, when you dodge, you're zigging. When you're winning this game, you're zagging, I guess. The CLG Academy transition a Rift Herald into a 3-tower push in the mid lane.
This is something that their comp is extremely strong at, just being able to shove people off turrets. Jhin ultimate plus Rumble ultimate are both great for that. Olaf runs forward. They recognize the number advantage. There you see that Rumble equalizer thrown on top as well. Phil getting that kind of flank off, setting up a lot of these plays. Gets the follow-up hook onto Sheep. 2 people dead instantly. Rift Herald's still alive from that initial push. It's going to help them grab 3 turrets in the mid lane early on and jump out to about a 3,500 gold lead.
Well, everything that Tempo Storm pretty much had in their advantage there, it's kind of been nullified a little bit. Zag was at a CS disadvantage, but he's currently a 1-0-5 Jhin, so those kills and assists are more than making up for the CS advantages that Freeze have over him. Mid lane matchup 2-1-4 now on this Galio compared to the 1-2-1, so for 30 CS differential, not going to be all too much different here. And all that Galio really has to do is be a tank. He just needs to have a little bit of wave clear. He needs to use the hero's entrance onto potentially Olaf, as we've seen so far in these matchups, and he's doing his job.
Well, so the thing that's great with the Olaf Rumble is the fact that Galio Rumble is the mid lane Galio often goes Abyssal Mask very early on, increasing the damage of people who are going to be doing magic damage. And Rumble doesn't actually need to be nearby to do that magic damage. He just throws his equalizer on top of wherever Tuesday and Omar God are going to be running crazy. So you're able to get that Abyssal Mask damage amplification without actually needing the Rumble to be near the Galio. It's actually a pretty cute combination, and I like the way it's working out for him so far.
And we see this equalizer being used for another purpose of itself, which is wave clear duty to keep away Tempo Storm from the top tower here. That lets Omar God just solo down on the 3rd elemental break of the game. CLG Academy objective control is all theirs now with the 4 towers they've taken, 3 of them off of that Rift Herald they got, and now a 3rd Dragon and Ocean Drake for themselves.
Tempo Storm not completely deterred from the top lane. Gonna have to be forced out now that they're done with the Dragon. CLG Academy start rotating up there, scare them away. Fallen Bandit clears the wave, and Tuesday just keeps pushing down around this bot lane. Gonna grab their 5th turret of the game just 20 minutes in.
And CLG Academy are putting on quite the show in their first match here on the Challenger broadcast. Like we said, we haven't seen much of them so far in the Challenger series. They're currently in 5th place in Tempo Storm. They've fallen down a little bit. They are currently in a tie for 2nd place, although their only 2 losses currently are against United. So you can't really fault them for that when you're losing to the 1st place team who is currently undefeated.
Similarly, for CLG Academy, they have to play Big God Jackals as well as Delta Fox, still 2 people that they should at least be very competitive with, so they can claw their way back into that 4th place spot, get back into the playoffs very, very easily based off the matches that they have left to play.
Yeah, and they did wind up playing against Big God Jackals once already, as we mentioned earlier today. We are kind of in the 2nd half of the Challenger Series split. So this is, you know, the chance for CLG Academy to kind of come back and stay on par with those other teams that will be in that kind of currently tied for 2nd place spot, but in the top 4 to try to make it into the Challenger Series playoffs. They lost against Big God Jackals the first time around, so that's got to be something on their minds as they play them a little bit later on in this split. But if you could take a win off of a team like Tempo Storm, who is tied in that 2nd place position, all of a sudden you could wind up leapfrogging into 3rd, you could wind up leapfrogging into 2nd place. And if you're doing it looking this good, this is a team that has taken E United to 3 games both times as they collapse down onto Sheep. The curtain call goes out, and it's lights out for Zyra.
Good call by Sheep there, not even to bother flashing. You're still in so much trouble. If you flash quick, you can get Blitzcrank hooked back. You still get shot by the Jhin. There's no reason to burn your flash there. They do lose their mid inhibitor off of it, though, so it's a kind of lose-lose situation for Tempo Storm. And with that, one of the things I was going to talk about was the fact that CLG Academy, despite their lead, still need to execute around Baron pretty well. But if you have the mid lane inhibitor already down, it makes it so much easier to pressure Baron.
It's almost like you have priority in that lane.
Does it on its own.
CLG Academy, though, you do mention a good fact here, is the Baron control is going to be something we kind of have a bit of a question mark for. It's actually, they didn't even go for Baron. They were going to go for another fight. A flash hook winds up bringing in cost to the rest of the team. He's going to drain tank himself up with that Ravenous Flock and Zanya's, but he will be just stalling the inevitable as Wiggly tries to get an ultimate down. But on the backside, Selfie and Sheep been able to pick up some kills, so this is a bit more of an even fight. A 2-for-2 trade so far. Tempo Storm have to back away from these super minions pushing mid.
Bit of a mistake there by CLG Academy. MarkZ wanted to keep chasing forward onto the rest of Tempo Storm, and it allowed Quas to drain tank a little bit longer than they wanted to. And then when they continued to chase up with where MarkZ was, Sheep had snuck his way into the brush, drops his ultimate, and is able to clean up Zag there as well. So a bit of a overextension. They wanted to punish Tempo Storm for walking up this mid lane, but they kind of get wrapped around on. So you see the hook coming onto Quas. Instead of all of them focusing him down, the Zanya's procs, MarkZ continues to run forward, Fallen Bandit kind of in between the two. Everyone starts getting low, and then as they walk forward right into Zyra, there's the easy kill back.
And so Tempo Storm, they're down in this game, but this fight has given them a little bit of a stall period. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, CLG Academy, the big question is how they're going to control around this Baron pit pressure. Their early game has been pretty solid right now. I'll definitely give them a solid A, maybe not necessarily an A+ or an S at this point, because they did have some disadvantages on the bottom side of the map. But when they played against Big God's Jackals earlier on, I believe it was week number 2 when they played them, they struggled around the Baron pit, and that's where Big God's Jackal was actually able to take the series against them, was in a Baron pit fight that they struggled to secure early on.
Did your grading system include S's, Tom? Are you like the lead client?
I mean, I have to. I work here.
You're only giving them an A? This is a great early game. They got an inhibitor turret before 20 minutes.
They lost first tower, and they were at a CS disadvantage. You know how much that weighs into your grade?
They got a 5-man dive off bot lane, 3 kills.
They did. They did do that.
Most teams in the NALCS have to kill to be able to make plays like that.
I think,
very true. You know, yes, they did have some laning deficit problems, but a lot of that is due to some of the matchups as well.
Yes.
So now CLG Academy firmly in the lead, forcing down this Baron, but teleport's coming in from Tempo Storm.
Yeah, CLG Academy have baited this one out from Tempo Storm. The teleport's coming in, and Sheep's going to be able to get out for now.
Nice
the command shockwave turns things around, but there's an equalizer to zone away freeze from the rest of this fight. But now CLG Academy may have bitten off a little bit more than they could chew, but Quas and Selfie are still in the front, and the Hero's entrance goes into a Hero's shutdown as Selfie picks up a kill for himself, and CLG Academy cannot seal the deal around Baron again. Tempo Storm are the ones that come out ahead, 3 for 1.
It's one of those situations that we're talking about with the Baron buff. You can back off there and let your mid lane super creeps take care of some stuff on their own. You see them already pushed into the base. If you don't hard commit to that fight, you might be able to make it out. But to be fair to CLG Academy, it did look like a decent opportunity to win a fight, but they blew a ton of stuff onto Sheep early on. And despite the fact that the equalizer was good, hitting both backline carries of Tempo Storm, there was no other follow-up available. So Tempo Storm was able to melt down the front line and get a couple kills. So taking a look at it here, you see Tuesday as well as Phil up on the top side. They go onto Sheep, and you see how much stuff they're blowing, trying to get that kill onto him. In the meantime, Quas, the guy who teleported in, did not get focused down. He's able to do that drain taking that is so important for Swain to be able to win these fights. Forces down multiple members of the front line of CLG Academy. Tuesday goes up in the air, dies as soon as he lands, death on impact. And then it's an easy chase down for the back line of Tempo Storm.
As you mentioned, Tempo Storm have a lineup that don't necessarily have a traditional tank. They have the Swain instead. Provides a little bit more damage and is durable as long as that Ignite is on cooldown from the side of Phil, which it looks like it was for that fight, considering it's up right now. The side of CLG Academy, they have a pretty solid tanky front line. They have the Galio, they have the Olaf, but they might be lacking a little bit of damage when that Rumble Equalizer is used to zone away the backline that's not on top of that front line from the side of Tempo Storm. They have a little bit of trouble sealing the deal, but it will be supplemented now with the fact they picked up yet another Infernal Drake for their side. So CLG Academy, while they haven't been able to pick up the bounty on Baron, they're still continuing to catch all those dragons.
There's still a lot of things that's going well for CLG. Like you said, the double Infernal Drake is great. The mid lane inhibitor is already down. Your team comp with having 4 melees obviously is going to struggle in a siege situation. Now they don't have to deal with that, and they can focus on trying to catch people out.
They get the flash away from Selfie here. They've used a lot already. They continue to chase down. Looks like the Deadly Flourish did not wind up landing onto Selfie to root him. A good Zanya dodges out the command shockwave, but MarkZ able to pick up a kill onto Selfie's Orianna. Now it's going to be Quash trying to come around the backside of this fight here, but CLG Academy, they got super minions still pushing in that mid lane. It looks like they'll be content to rotate around here and force Tempo Storm to run back through their own base while the inhibitor responds.
Good awareness out of CLG Academy there. They actually pinged the inhibitor saying, this is coming back up, let's go deal with it right now since we just want to skirmish. Now they're going to back out, probably reset, and try and set up around that dragon again, and or Baron, excuse me, and hopefully play that pick-off situation a little bit cleaner this time around.
Well, they have no ultimate on Selfie, and they have no Selfie for a couple of seconds, so CLG Academy can potentially just put some vision down on the map, but after pushing up the mid lane, taking the inhibitor, it looks like they're going to go back and spend some of that money they got in that fight. Already 14 kills to 7, so they doubled the kill score here from Tempo Storm. But Tempo Storm are down but not out. Despite being this far behind in the Dragons, being behind in the towers and everything, it's still only about a 2,500 gold lead here for CLG Academy.
Still difficult if you're a Tempo Storm fan, because that was the ideal time to stabilize the game. Your mid lane inhibitor's coming up. They just got an Infernal Dragon, which, yes, is unfortunate, but you can start now trying to play the vision game around Baron and hopefully find an angle if they try and rush up mid. It's still obviously playing from a behind position now, the Tempo Storm, but you have brought it really close to even. Now the gold lead back up a little bit, like you said, close to the 2,000, excuse me, and then the mid lane inhibitor critically down again.
So now CLG Academy will rinse and repeat, trying to go back towards this Baron pit area. They've established some decent control wards down. They have a bunch around the pit. Tempo Storm very much so in the dark around this point in time. We have one scrying trinket left on the side of Selfie. Dodges out on a hook there from Phil. The root coming up from the Deadly Force will not land. A good equalizer rips across Selfie, and the hero's entrance will follow. Looks like the curtain call is going to be used to try to catch them as they retreat on the backside as Zag snipes himself out. A Selfie. That's going to be Tempo Storm now without their mid laner. They have picked up a kill onto MarkZ though, but they still got another tank in Tuesday to have to deal with. Quas's Drain tanking away off of just that Galio. The Deadly Flourish will not land as Quas flashes away from that one. An extended fight, an extended trade. It's a 1-for-1.
But there's a big minion wave building up on the top side. CLG Academy playing with pressure, going to rotate up there. Even though the fight goes just even, they have the minion waves working for them. They're going to meet up with this one, start hammering down this top turret. Doesn't seem like they want to overextend for it, though.
You gotta be
Teleport's
careful.
coming back in.
Yeah, Quas going to be teleporting into this one, and it will wind up finishing. Deadly Flourish lands to just stop the home guard coming in, but Tempo Storm looking to try to collapse here. The teleport's going to be responded here as Tuesday is going to wind up finishing that for himself. He gets rooted up there by Sheep. Freeze, however, takes a large chunk of damage from that one. It looks like that CLG Academy and Tempo Storm are going to trade teleports just to back away.
Actually comes out in advantage of CLG Academy. They have the double global, so the Galio mid lane is actually what teleports to match Quas's TP. So now Fallen Bandit with his teleport coming back up in just a couple of seconds and head down to that bot lane as you see him already doing that. Going to get that pushing in his advantage. And then Tempo Storm are going to be in a really tough spot where they're going to have to deal with a bot lane wave while CLG Academy is most likely going to push up mid and try and bait around that Baron for the 3rd time now. Hopefully going to finally win a fight decisively.
Well, if you're a CLG fan or CLG Academy newly minted fan, you're hoping that's what they wind up doing here, as it has been a little bit of a struggle, and the more and more these fights go on, even though they're super close or maybe slightly an advantage to CLG Academy, the gold lead is closing, and Tempo Storm have now gotten this one down to about a 1,500 gold lead. Selfie himself, while he didn't have the strong early game that we were talking about was a strength to this Tempo Storm roster, has kind of come back into his own, has a Leandry's Torment now in addition to a Void Staff, so all the magic resistance at the side of CLG Academy has been buying up here, be slightly less effective as they are actually both in a double AP threat kind of composition. Freeze has also kind of gone for, he stopped off, hasn't gone for the full Energizer style build with a rapid fire cannon, but instead has gotten that Lord Dominic's Regard to start ripping through this front line of CLG Academy.
Surprisingly early, like you said, Lord Dominic's Regard, only one armor item really built on the side of CLG Academy. I mean, they do have the Gargoyle Stone Plates as well, so there's a decent amount, and especially since they're going to be diving into the team, they actually probably will get that passive bonus increase in your armor and MR. So good decision actually out of Freeze is, I think, more about it. And here you see CLG Academy doing that bait like we were talking about. Surprisingly, Rumble has roamed over, wanting to be there as soon as they potentially get a pick. Gonna see if they can find anyone, but doesn't seem like Tempo Storm's biting quite yet.
They have solo laners pushing away on the top and mid of the map right now. It's now Tempo Storm going to be turning on the Galio, but with Freeze on that top lane and seeing Selfie kind of poke his head down into the bottom side, they're going to be starting up this Baron, but they're doing it a little bit slow. They've only got a Jhin for some maybe.
Well, they got the Rek'Sai.
Ooh, Rek'Sai winds up going over the wall. I don't know if Wiggly wanted to do that one, but there's going to be a Stranglethorn to try to save their jungler, and they will. Phil will go down as Freeze gets the credit from the Baron kill. Quas is in the front line. Zanyas is through the equalizer. The hero's entrance is going to fall on top of that. Command Shockwave lands on the Tuesday. He's got to Justice punch himself the heck out of there. Tempo Storm with an engagement on the Baron pit will force CLG Academy away. They're not done yet, though. Sheep has to burn his flash. Baron's hungry for supports as he fires a shot at the Zyra. And once again, this Baron dance results in a kills going in favor of Tempo Storm.
CLG Academy not willing to be as patient as they can be. You see that huge bot lane wave. You saw the wave in the mid lane. Eventually, Tempo Storm's going to have to commit to those or just start losing things for free. CLG could have played that a little bit safer, but they had really immaculate vision control. They got a little impatient. They wanted to just get the Baron down, and they get a nice hook onto Wiggly there, but they don't actually finish him off. And during this whole time, Quas starts wrapping around the side, as well as the fact that Phil had been tanking the Barons. He gets low, finished off, and now it's a 4v5 as Quas has already started chunking out the rest of your team. And CLG Academy unable to find an advantageous fight around the Baron for the 4th time in a row now, I believe. It's getting very, very dicey. As you said, Tempo Storm starting to scale back into this game, now actually have the gold lead.
Yeah, I gave CLG Academy a solid A for their early game. Disagreed with me a little bit there, but now I'm going to give them a solid D for their mid to late game for detrimental as they've lost that gold lead. They can't seal the deal around Baron. One of the things they do have on their side is the stacking of the Elemental Drakes. There's a 5th Elemental Drake in this game, which is very rare that we got to getting to 5 Elemental Drakes to begin with, but that Elder Dragon could be maybe that little bit of oomph in these team fights that they're lacking. The Elder Dragon burn at that point will be well over 200 damage. They still got a while to go, though. They have to take down the Ocean Drake spawning, which they've had trouble with, and then seal the deal the fact that the Elder Dragon is going to spawn. And it's not looking that great.
It's still difficult for Tempo Storm, but now that their mid lane inhibitor has respawned for the 2nd time, but this time not instantly dropped, hopefully they can contest around mid a little bit easier. They don't have to spend so long wailing on a super creep. CLG still ahead in terms of map position, though. Gonna start off on this Ocean Dragon for free. Tempo Storm does have some vision on it. They know this is going on, so they're moving into the Baron area to get some vision back in their favor, so it's a little bit easier to contest when CLG flips back up to that side of the map.
Yeah, CLG Academy had a large amount of vision over by the Baron pit area, so it's going to take Tempo Storm some time to clear that one out. You mentioned at the same time, it's going to be an Ocean Drake that goes over to the side of CLG Academy. Tempo Storm, in the meantime, have put down some Baron vision. So now CLG Academy won't be necessarily as safe, and now they're only going to have to try to fight to get the Baron for themselves or try to fight Tempo Storm. They're going to try to fight for vision control around the pit.
The other thing that we were talking about in the early game was the fact that CLG Academy, when they were behind a little bit in gold, they still had a lot of turrets to grab. The flip side is now true for Tempo Storm as well. If you look at the minimap, you see a lot of those kind of hollowed out looking turrets. That means they're pretty low and close to dropping. If Tempo Storm can actually get enough pressure to grab a couple of those, they can actually start building a pretty substantial gold lead for themselves, as well as even potentially just winning a team fight decisively as a way to open that up.
Yeah, with the gold lead, or the gold count pretty much dead even here. Tempo Storm, you mentioned, down 1 tower compared to 5. Looks like CLG Academy, though, might be going for a bit of a play here. Teleport coming in here from Fallen Bandit. They're trying to catch on the Selfie, but Quas is also in the area. Quickly throws down the Decrepify AoE to try to wind up zoning away CLG Academy, and one of those towers on the map will fall for Tempo Storm, so Teleport burn and Tempo Storm come out ahead.
Yeah, they tried to find an opening onto Selfie in the top lane, but Tempo Storm reacted quickly enough to cut off the collapse coming in from Counter Logic Gaming, and then you see Selfie able to just walk on out of there with some extra help from Quas zoning away. They get a teleport out of Fallen Bandit, and they also are able to grab a top turret. Great play out of them.
And now CLG Academy, it looks like they're struggling to kind of transition that early game into pretty much anything in the later stages. I mean, it's very interesting to say, too, considering they've gotten 2 inhibitors at this point. It just doesn't seem to know how to seal the deal by ending it.
It's one of those situations where your comp has a lot of playmaking. They made some plays, they got an advantage, but then you have to keep making those plays. This isn't a comp where you can kind of just set up and instantly win. You actually have to land the hooks and those kinds of things, and they struggle to find decisive victories, and Tempo Storm's comp, on the other hand, can sit back with the Swain, with the Ori, with the Caitlyn, and play it slow, but that's a good equalizer.
It winds up zoning down onto 3. The 2 tanks get locked up by that command shockwave. Fallen Bandit goes golden with the Zanya's Hourglass in the front line. Quas is kind of behind everybody. They're chasing forward onto Freeze. They're taking down 1 DPS, and now they can turn down into the tank Quas. Zanya's Hourglass goes out. The Drain tank is there, but a good Deadly Flourish locks him down. A double kill for Zag.
Fallen Bandit has a monster team fight, trades his life for 2 people, almost gets a 3rd in Selfie, and hopefully buys enough space for CLG Academy to actually start grabbing this Baron buff. But Tempo Storm doesn't want to give it up. Sheep and Wiggly are collapsing. Selfie had to go back to base to heal. This is basically a Baron steal situation, not going to really be able to try and force them off of it.
Well, now it's time for Wiggly to see if he's got what it takes to steal a Baron away from a 4-member strong CLG Academy. I think he mentioned it's not going down super fast. Their biggest DPS is Zag, and he's got to stop and reload every couple of seconds. Selfie's now rejoined the fray. Command Shockwave is almost available. Baron's super low, and it's going to be secured by Galio. An early spike there from MarkZ, but Wiggly could not get over the wall.
CLG Academy do not have an extremely fast Baron team comp, and they even hesitated a little bit there. We'll take another look at that mid lane fight that actually got that for them. Tempo Storm feeling like they're getting back in the game. I think they have an opening around the mid lane to push up. Doesn't start great for CLG Academy. They basically waste their Jhin ultimate for a little bit of harass, but what really turns this is that excellent equalizer out of Fallen Bandit onto 3 people, burning people down just half health by himself, flashes forward past the Orianna Shockwave, and now, as we snap back to live,
the equalizer used just to snipe a kill onto the support, but they got a Baron buff on their side now, so they could be A-okay to push down this mid lane now that they have a numbers advantage.
This is one of the weaknesses of Zyra is in the late game. If you're against long-range pick-off tools, it is a nightmare. She has no tank stats for the most part. She has no mobility the way a Karma and some of these other supported style mages will have. So if she gets equalized or shot with the Jhin, she's going to die very fast.
Yeah, meanwhile, speaking of dying really fast, the 3rd inhibitor of the game falls, although it's the same inhibitor that's fallen 3 times.
Yeah, a little disingenuous to call it. They get their 3rd inhibitor. No, it's only 1 inhibitor down still, but a good job out of CLG Academy. Just when we think they're starting to slip out of the game, they find a great team fight off the back of Fallen Bandit. They get the Baron, and then they are also able to grab their mid inhibitor. Now they need to actually start grabbing some other turrets and inhibitors, because they've been in this situation a couple times before, but without the Baron buff.
Yep, so now we'll see if that Baron buff is a little bit of oomph they need to push them over the edge and crack the base of Tempo Storm. Backside though, Tempo Storm will have to be on wave clear duties here. Freeze has kind of gone for full Energizer build, now has the rapid fire cannon available to himself, so he will be the majority of wave clear duty as these Baron buffed up minions will not be taking nearly as much damage from Swain or Orianna. CLG Academy, though, will get themselves one of the last remaining outer towers on the map for Tempo Storm, the last one up in that top side. And we'll have to see now if they're able to crack the bottom lane inhibitor.
Well, Caitlyn does have her trap defense set up. One of the most annoying things about sieging first to Caitlyn, and especially for the comp of CLG Academy, like we said, 4 melee champions. Yes, they do have a little bit more range than some melee champions do. Rumble, Equalizer, as well as the Blitzcrank hook going pretty far. But at the end of the day, it is hard to posture around a turret if no one is actually able to walk up and start hitting it. It's not as threatening as it is when you have an all-range comp kind of on like Tempo Storm does.
No, Tempo Storm, it's a large minion wave here for CLG Academy, so they can't defend the last outer tower on the map, but they're looking to establish the Caitlyn defense now on the top side. So with those cupcakes available, CLG Academy will be hard-pressed to push through this one, but it looks like they might just be going for a brute force on this one. The curtain call is channeled. The Zag misses that 4th shot, but lands the other 3, getting a little bit of damage down on the Tempo Storm. Sheep walking away from the team will get hooked in and taken down. CLG Academy find an opening here. Command Shockwave being used, but the Xanya's Hourglass was still there. Equalizer over the wall, trying to zone people away. Fallen Bandit will finally go down as Freeze is left unharmed over the wall. Wiggly jumped in, and he will wind up falling to MarkZ, but now Freeze, large chunk of damage from that crit shot on Zig, but Freeze is the one that picks up a kill onto Blitzcrank. CLG Academy, they started that one out, but they're the ones who come out behind.
CLG Academy want to scare them off the turret with the Jhin ultimate. Doesn't actually do that much damage, but they still find a hook onto whoa!
Zag flashing forward. Hero's entrance used just for the resistances against the towers. Quas is kind of on the back line here. Zag, though, Deadly Flourish will not land. Quash has to flash away from that one as Galio actually winds up falling. Freeze now, the lone marksman trying to chase down into a low HP Olaf and a low HP Jhin. Forces them away.
Just when you thought they might have backed off that top inhibitor turret, they continue to try and force it down. Doesn't quite work out for them, though, as they lose a couple extra members on the side of CLG Academy. And like we said, they wanted to force really hard around that turret. You don't really have another way to play it. You can't whittle the turret down with this comp. You need to either force them off or get a pick. The force-off failed. They do find a pick, but once again, it's on to Sheep. He's not the most threatening member of the team at 1-6-6. Does have his Leandry, so, you know, you can't completely ignore his damage, but not the biggest threat. And now Tempo Storm are going to try and get down this Elder Dragon.
Might be their first neutral objective on the map. It looks like CLG Academy are not ready to respond to this one. Equalizer rips across the back line. MarkZ in the pit, tries to take it away, and Zag gets the Elder Dragon, and now that's a 5-6 stack Elder Dragon burn for CLG Academy, and they're going to roast through Tempo Storm. Quas is trying to sustain himself, but he's gonna fall. Wiggly going to be the only one left alive as it's Tuesday in the front line, wailing away on the wreck side. CLG Academy, this could be the end.
Wiggly gets out, but a 4-for-0 for CLG Academy off the Tempo Storm force. The mid inhibitors are already down. They have super creeps heading into the base. There's no way for a Rek'Sai to defend 1v5. CLG Academy are going to be able to grab game 1 off the back of a decisive Elder Dragon fight.
And it looked very, very good for them in the early game. A little bit shaky towards the mid game, but the late game objective stacking from CLG Academy will be the reason they were able to take game number 1 over Tempo Storm.
And honestly, I don't hate the call on the side of Tempo Storm to force down that Elder Dragon. Sure, it doesn't do very much for you if you get it, but there's 2 properties about Elder Dragon. We always talk about how the burn increases if you have a lot of dragons. It actually takes longer to do if you have a lot of Elder Dragons. So, you know, they have no dragons on the side of Tempo Storm. You can take that one relatively quickly and deny, CLG from being able to force around it. So they were trying to go for that. Another good play out of Fallen Bandit, teleported in on the side, chunk down multiple members, buying enough time for the rest of his team to get in there. And then it's actually the Jhin who's able to steal away the Elder Dragon.
And we saw very good usage of the ultimates in these team fights from CLG Academy, whether it was just the fact that they were that coordinated to use them or just the composition that they picked. You mentioned the Jhin being able to kind of sit away in the back line, very far away from his very beefy front line. Even though he was the only ranged member in a 4 melee composition, he was able to whale DPS on the backside. I think Zag only died once that entire game. Very effective usage of the composition coming out from CLG.
It's one of those comps where if you execute on it, it looks genius. And if you fail, it looks like, what were you thinking? You had no way of getting onto the Orianna and the Zyra and the Caitlyn, but they found enough opportunities. They made a big play in the early game, which is really what kind of opened the map up for them. And then after they got that dive off on the bot side, they can run around the map and try and find these pickoffs, which their comp does so well.
Yeah, well, one of the things that they wound up utilizing their comp figure to be able to do was to establish mid lane priority. And the first replay we actually have of this is going to be when they wound up taking an early game fight and they wound up utilizing that Rift Herald push quite effectively, taking 3 towers off the back of 1 Rift Herald.
So this is after that bot lane dive. It got them their advantage. They want to dive mid lane as well. Selfie is trying to wave clear, but he's not respecting the amount of tools they have available to them. Zag opens up with the ultimate. Once they're forced into a corridor, the Rumble Equalizer comes over the top as well, while Olaf is running at you the entire time. They get a couple kills there, and then because this was a Rift Herald push, it's left healthy, and it's going to be able to grab them 3 turrets right down the mid lane. It does get a little dicey at the end for CLG Academy, but they're able to just barely clean up that last inhibitor turret.
And if you're just tuning in, you maybe saw didn't see the early stages of that game, you see that replay, you're kind of wondering, like, well, where the heck did it wind up really going wrong? CLG Academy had such a strong early game, but the mid to late game kind of, not just decision making, but the way that they were playing around the map, they sort of just ceded those advantages. You mentioned it during the cast, they kind of took their foot off of the gas pedal and did not keep making those plays, did not keep forcing issues against Tempo Storm.
Well, I think it was actually the opposite problem where they were forcing a lot of fights. We mentioned maybe 4 failed Baron team fights when they had advantages. So they actually could have played a little bit slower because they did get that inhibitor very soon after they took the inhibitor turret. They basically picked off Sheep again and then went right back to it. And then with that mid lane pushing on its own with the super creeps, at different times they tried to pick fights when they really could have just waited a second longer.
Well, one of those things that got Tempo Storm kind of back into that game was a fight around the 25-minute mark where they were able to kind of capitalize on the fact that CLG Academy have issues forcing around this Baron pit area. And you can see here, it starts out with a bait from CLG Academy to get the Baron down very low, and they think they could turn on this fight with a collapse from the top side.
Yeah, and they focus down Sheep once again, always the one that they're going for. This time he's able to get out alive and buys Quas, who is teleporting into the enemy team. Because they were so focused on Sheep, they didn't go right onto Quas when he completes his teleport. He's able to chunk out multiple members of the back line. He gets pretty low, but he's swaying. He's comfortable kind of getting low as long as he's not taking too much damage. And because the front line failed to assassinate Sheep, it starts getting focused down by Selfie and Freeze, able to do a lot of damage with the Caitlyn Orianna combo.
And so, as you mentioned, Tempo Storm being able to kind of claw themselves back into that game. They had so many resources left open on the map. They had multiple towers coming in, but CLG Academy are the ones that continue to try to force force things around that mid lane area. There with the collapse and a Tempo Storm. And as you mentioned, the last fight of the game that you said you didn't hate the call from Tempo Storm. It's kind of something they needed to do, but CLG Academy were kind of just not one step ahead, but they had the right positioning at the right time to be able to collapse onto that final fight around Elder Dragon.
Right, you see that they just want to burn this down as quickly as they can. They know that, like we said, without having all those dragon stacks, you actually take this relatively quickly, but there's a great equalizer out of Fallen Bandit. It forces the DPS of Tempo Storm to back off, and it allows Zag's ultimate to actually snipe that one away. No smite was used by either jungler, not ready for the burst that can come in from a Jhin. And once they are forced, the backline of Tempo Storm is already get half health and forced away from the Infernal Dragon. Once it's taken for CLG Academy, hey, that's a 5-stack Elder Dragon. Gonna do a lot of damage.
Yeah, and you can see that's how they rip through this front line, well, basically the entire line of Tempo Storm, and we're able to kind of just come up and seal the deal on that game. So CLG Academy, well, all right, we'll go back to the grading system, so we touched upon this in the actual game. Early game, I gave them an A. You gave them like an S.
Yes.
Mid game to late game, I gave them a D. Did you agree with that?
I would mostly agree with that. Come late game, they were still able to find a couple fights that went in their favor, especially because Fallen Bandit started stepping up hard and winning a lot of team fights for the team, as opposed to like, oh, that was a great call. It's like, wow, that was a great equalizer. And I think that's why you can kind of give it a D, because the decision-making wasn't necessarily all there. But at the very least, like we said, they kept looking for opportunities, and that's what their comp has to do, is win team fights. They can't afford to play a complete objective game if they're not getting the kills beforehand.
And CLG Academy had a little bit of trouble closing that one out, but Tempo Storm, they hung in there for a large majority. The gold lead never really exceeded 3,000. That may have been one of the reasons why CLG Academy may have felt like they were so far ahead, but when they continued to try to put the pedal to the metal, kept running into a brick wall from Tempo Storm. So Tempo Storm couldn't seal the deal on like a comeback, but they were still hanging in there with CLG Academy.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Tempo Storm, you're not too upset over how that game went. The early game was a little bit of a disaster. You fell far behind, but then you clawed your way back throughout the entire mid game. Eventually, they even got a gold lead, and then it was just a couple fights that didn't go their way. So if you have a little bit better of an early game, maybe you can continue to outplay them in the mid and late game.
And we're going to have to see what happens in this one, because Mark and I are going to be going on a caster cooldown. We'll be back in just a few minutes for Game 2 between Tempo Storm and CLG Academy. So don't go anywhere. You're watching the North American Challenger Series. Teleport's going to be trying to turn this one around as Fallen Bandit comes in. Equalizer cuts off Selfie's escape. He has to flash back under his tower, but he's in a small corridor. Flash forward and first blood. We even wound up using the hero's entrance to want to pick up the first kill down on the Sheep. It's teleport follow was there from Quas, but this is all going perfect for CLG Academy. He's going to drain tank himself up with that Ravenous block and Zanya's, but he will be just stalling the inevitable as Wiggly tries to get an ultimate down. But on the backside, Selfie and Sheep been able to pick up some kills. He's kind of behind everybody. They're chasing forward on to Freeze. They taking out one DPS, and now they can turn down into the tank Quas. Zanya's Hourglass goes out, the Drain Tank is there, but a good Deadly Flourish locks him down. A double kill for Zag. Command Shockwave being used, but oh, the Zanya's Hourglass was still there. Equalizer over the wall, trying to zone people away. Fallen Bandit will finally go down as Freeze is left unharmed over the wall. Wiggly